Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Dr. Jenny Phelps from Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies. I'm here with Dean and Vice-Provost Dr. Susan Porter. And I think I can say for both of us that we're really delighted to see so many people who are interested in learning more about this initiative. Our goal for today is to provide you with some information. We do have some slides to go through, and these slides will be made available on the Grad Studies website, so don't feel that you have to take notes from them. But we really want this to be a dialogue as well. So we will be presenting some information, and there will be ample time at the end for there to be some question and answer and dialogue about the initiative. The word initiative is important here. This is a pilot project. It's something new. It's something that we're starting here at UBC. And there is actually quite a bit of interest in what we're doing at our colleague universities across campus, or across Canada, because this is a bit of a new framework, a new way of thinking about what doctoral education can be and who it can serve, and how it can prepare doctoral students for the careers ahead of them and for making positive social contributions. But we do emphasize that this is a bit of an experiment. We may not have answers to every question that comes forward. We probably won't. Dean Porter really initiated this idea and brought together a group of faculty members and a couple of students from across campus to form a bit of a steering committee on this topic. And we've brought the concept to the point where we were ready to bring it to the public, bring it to you, and to have an initiative that offered funding for graduate students. But we knew that we needed to bring our ideas to you, the students and the faculty members who are passionately interested in how doctoral education could possibly be a little bit different than it has been traditionally, serve new purposes. We know that many of you are already engaged in this type of work, that you're working with faculty members, you're passionate about serving purposes of the public good, and we know that we need to be in dialogue and collaboration with you to advance this vision, learn more about what we can be doing now and into the future. There are some more seats down here. Nina, Dan, Rachel? No? Okay, so for today, we've introduced why we're here today. We're going to, in a few slides, talk about the origins and the goals of the pilot initiative. We're going to talk a little bit about what we even mean by public scholarship. It's not a self-evident term, so we want to talk about it a little bit. Give some examples of doctoral student scholarship that we think fits under this umbrella. And then we'll talk a little bit about the specific components of the initiative, the network, academic support, and the funding component as well. And then we'll engage in some question and answer and dialogue with all of you. We do have a microphone in the center of the room. I'm not sure it's necessary. We probably can hear each other as long as we speak up. And then just one other housekeeping note is we did want to make this session available to people who couldn't make it, so we are audio recording it so we can create a podcast. So just keep that in mind when you're making your comments. It is being recorded. I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thanks very much, Jenny. I think that's a terrific introduction to where we're going today. And one more comment that we're calling this an emergent design. We haven't figured everything out yet, and I'm pretty sure that will become clear as we entertain your questions. So just give us some grace in that, and we'll figure things out as we go along. So I wanted to just provide very brief overview, a little bit more detail about what Jenny's talked about in terms of why we are reimagining the PhD. This quote from The Formation of Scholars, which was the book, one of the books created out of the Carnegie Initiative of the Doctorate in 2008, I think captures much of what we're talking about. They use the word formation because that is a much more holistic, encompassing term for what happens during, or what should happen during doctoral education. And they made the point, and we have agreed strenuously, that the types of things that students must learn, the types of ways of being, the attitudes, the concepts, the competencies that students need to gain are best gained in a contextual reference. In other words, while doing the scholarship that is part of the PhD, rather than add-ons, rather than doing intense scholarship that is academically focused and then taking a workshop. That can be very useful. Workshops can be useful in providing the transferable skills, but all-encompassing formation preferentially involves that holistic learning in the context of doing diverse scholarship. So as we thought about this, we thought about reimagining the PhD from the position, we initially thought about it from the position of changing career outcomes. We know the PhD was the modern research PhD was created in the early 19th century, really primarily to regenerate the professoriate. That is, of course, no longer the case for probably a majority. A majority of students are not entering the tenure track positions in faculty. So they're doing a variety of different things, wonderful things that contribute in many different ways to the world. So that was a strong impetus for us to rethink what we're doing in a PhD. There were streams of changes that were happening elsewhere that really converged on this same endpoint, and that is the changing nature of academic research. Even within academia, research is changing. The world is getting more complex. There is a need for high thinking in many of the problems that we face as a world, and so even the academic nature of research is changing. Of course, we're all aware of the reiterated demands of government and funding agencies to see positive, tangible impacts, to see innovations in society, and this relates to this as well. And actually, Jenny, maybe you can talk a little bit about, well, maybe the next slide, students' own desires to contribute to the public good tangibly. We know that a frequent interest of students for doing the PhD in the first place is to contribute positively to society. And this is one way of helping them do that while they are a student. So the goals of the pilot summarize just, I think, what I've said in a bit more, to encourage and enable a broadened conception of the PhD so that they gain experience in the environments and types of scholarship they may productively engage in. This, in a sense of the changing scholarship in the academy, there's been some new terminology over the past decades developed about what types of scholarship should be valued. We have always valued the scholarship of discovery, which is the traditional new knowledge research that has been done at universities. But scholarship is much broader than that. Scholarship can also be around teaching and learning. Scholarship can also be around application. Scholarship can be around engagement. Scholarship can be integration of different ideas and disciplines. So this broader view of scholarship is what we're aiming for, and for students to gain experience not only in that scholarship, but in the environments in which the types of environments they might find themselves in later. We want students' work to be evaluated as part of their degree. We want to say this is a valuable part of a PhD at UBC. So it's not as if you do your PhD and then you can do some of this good work over there. We want to say this is a PhD at UBC. This is valued and evaluated to make sure it's high quality. Do you do it well? Maybe you don't do it well. We want to make sure that it's done well. Another reason it's more pragmatic is that we know that when students get out there in the real world, people appreciate them. They learn the value of what they do, and it generates, hopefully, some valuable career opportunities for students to actually be in those places. And then, again, it allows students to contribute to the public good in a tangible way during their degree. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Well, just on that last point, so I did my dissertation research relatively recently with international doctoral students, and part of what I asked them was why they were pursuing a doctoral degree in the first place. And, I got some of the answers I expected, like they were really passionate about a topic, they wanted to improve their career outcomes, but there was one finding that was so prominent, and it took me by surprise, and later on I was sort of surprised that it surprised me. But it was a very common, pervasive motivation that students were seeking to get a doctoral degree to enable them better to make a positive social contribution in the world. That was their core motivation. I mean, not for everybody, but there was a very, very strong desire to use their education, their skills, and their networks to make a positive difference. And some of the students that I studied there was ways for them to do that, and they knew how they were going to do that. But a number of students were finding a big disconnect between what they were doing in their PhD and how to connect it to their desire to really use it for public benefit. And that's part of that gap that we're wanting to fill with this.
We are certainly aware anecdotally of reasons. We're aware of many reasons for attrition, but we believe that one of the reasons is that people just didn't feel that connection. And so this may be a way to address that in part. So this is part of our reimagining. We've been having the conversation for about a year and a half. We had a symposium last year, mainly for faculty. As a result of that, we gathered, as Jenny mentioned, a group together, fairly large, and we've been talking about ways forward, and this is one of the ways forward. We haven't figured out all the ways forward, but we're as we said, totally going as we by the seat of our pants here. So in terms of this pilot, we've had a lot of questions so far as does my research qualify, and we will be having to figure that out, but the values that we are looking for. So I've drawn 3 different parts of the Venn diagram here. PhD education as a whole overlaps with purposeful social contribution and overlaps with broader career readiness. What we're hoping to find in this pilot is that sweet spot in the middle. Things that help students, that is integral to their PhD education, that is purposeful social contribution, and that helps them in a more broad way for readiness for a variety of careers. You can imagine all kinds of things in different things in different quadrants. So career readiness, as you know, in the far right, would be things like resume workshops. That would be a great career readiness professional development opportunity, but it's not really part of the PhD, and it's not directly relevant to the public. You can imagine things in the purposeful social contribution, like volunteer activities. And again, those are wonderful, valuable, but they're not part of the PhD education, which is what we're aiming for here. So the question is, what is published scholarship? And that has been defined different ways, and we're doing our best here. So we have said it's about creating and circulating knowledge for and with publics and communities, and that can be defined very broadly, often involving mutually beneficial partnerships of university knowledge and resources with those of the public and private sectors. So aspects of society that are outside the university, although I'll come back to that in a bit. So it could be both public and private sector. We're looking especially for true collaborations where the student is really integrated with the work of that entity. Hopefully enriching knowledge and practice, scholarship, creative activity, including intellectual curiosity and wonder. Enhancing curriculum, teaching and learning, preparing citizens, and addressing and helping solve critical problems. I'm sure we haven't quite got everything here, but I think you get the sense of what we're looking for. Now I'll come back to one aspect of this that we do want to include, and it's not that clear. Whoops.
Just get this out of the way.
Is that we also view teaching in the academy as part of this. So a PhD in a discipline would not normally encompass teaching as part of that doctoral degree, but we say perhaps it could. So it of course depends on your subject and your supervisor and so on. But so teaching in the context of this university or another university or some other venue are also part of what we consider public scholarship. The next slide is really just to point out that there is such a thing as rigorous scholarship. And the point is that all scholarship can be rigorous, whether it is in public scholarship, whether it is applied scholarship, whether it is teaching and learning scholarship, whether it is discovery scholarship. They all have standards of rigor. And we would expect those standards of rigor in any kind of scholarship. So these were devised quite a few number of years ago, and they're fairly well accepted as standards of rigor in scholarship in any fashion, in any form of that scholarship. So the importance of realistic goals that are clear and that identify important problems. Adequate preparation, which means a thorough understanding of the background, the discipline, if it's the case that it's a discipline of the subject, and if it's a community engaged scholarship, then understanding of that community. You don't just parachute in and try to figure things out. Well, you do try to figure things out, but not unknowingly. Methods. There is a rigor to the methods, and they are the appropriate ones to use. So again, these can all be evaluated for rigor. The result should be original and significant. Original can mean different things, but it's new and helpful, and contributes to new understanding. And again, in public scholarship, we would argue that is a tangible public good as well. Importantly, there has to be a reflective critique and evaluation of it. It's not just philanthropical efforts. You actually have to look at it critically, has to be evaluated by oneself as well as by peers. Preferably the understanding is transferable. And then dissemination to relevant audiences. So that might be an academic audience. It might very well be other audiences, or both. So I'm just going to give two examples, and I'm sure there are many people in this room that could equally be up here. So, but I thought these two covered some very helpful points. So these are real people. Jennifer Wan is a almost completed PhD student in my department of pathology and laboratory medicine, and David Meggs is a recent graduate in RMES, Resource Management and Environmental Studies. So, Jen looked at how might hospital labs reliably diagnose a particular type of breast cancer, and I'll give some more examples, give some more details of what that looks like. David was kind of on the opposite end of things. He's a concert pianist, actually, and he asked, how might we engage the public about sustainability through art, but not as a tool, not as an instrument to teach people things, but to provoke curiosity and a sense of wonder. This is extraordinarily simplified for for this context. He used many difficult words to describe this. So Jen, let me just take you briefly through her journey. So she started off doing what would be typically done in pathology. She looked at a particular type of breast cancer that is a subset of a type. But it's not diagnosed really at all in labs. And it's really important for it to be diagnosed because it responds to different therapies. It's got different outcomes. It's a really important thing to be able to diagnose, which we don't do currently. So she looked at a few biomarkers, which were proteins, just analyzing different breast cancer, these types of breast cancer, to see whether she could come up with a set of biomarkers that would help diagnose this for pathologists. She found a certain set that worked theoretically very well. So at this point, her supervisor, she had decided at this point in her PhD that she didn't actually want to enter an academic career. And her supervisor said, okay, well, go out and look and see what interests you. And one of the ways in which he directed her was to a emerging nonprofit group, which is a group of pathologists and staff people in hospitals that are looking at quality assurance programs. So she looked into that, and she was very excited about that. And so she came back and said, "Can I veer off my intended course on the PhD and ask whether we can apply these biomarkers in hospital labs in the real setting?" So the committee said sure. So she collaborated with that group, and together they looked at over 50 hospitals worldwide to look at these biomarkers. Unfortunately, they found these biomarkers did not work reliably. It was all over the place. Labs could not reliably use these biomarkers to diagnose these cancers. So they said, okay, they went back to the drawing board and they said, well, okay, let's look at a simpler set. Can these work? They went back to the labs, and sure enough, these were much better. They still were a very good diagnostic tool, and they were much more reliable. Then they went back again and said, okay, can we figure out the labs that didn't do well, can we figure out why they didn't do well? And they looked, yes, they had certain types of reagents, they did it certain ways that they found that if they were to change those, they could then do it reliably. So that comprised a thesis. So she had one chapter of that first one, and then a couple of chapters of the next quality assurance type of activities. So the end result is that now labs have the tools to do this. It's a very, very important social contribution. And what was very exciting about this, for me, but I think more for her, is that and this again brings in the broader purposes of this. That quality assurance group was so impressed with her that they said, okay, we want you to be the first scientific director of this nonprofit, and she is. And so not only was she assigned to be the scientific director, but then she was, okay, now you set it up and you run it. So she had to, and she worked with other groups to do this, but she is now the scientific director of this group. And so along the way, she learned how to work effectively with hospitals and staff, not only how to, but the importance of doing that. She saw firsthand how important it was to communicate directly, communicate well, because if you didn't get the message across, and that was critically important. And then she learned all the transferable skills relating to business development. So business grants, financing, business practices, complex management. As she said, she learned how to do the dance of business. And so she was thrilled with that outcome, and I'm thrilled with that outcome. Okay, so the next one was David, and you'll forgive me if I'm oversimplifying this or getting it slightly wrong, but I'll do my best. I'm a pathologist. So, sustainability is an extraordinarily complex problem, climate change and so on. And the way it has been approached, the IPCC and other ways it have been approached, is through a kind of an information deficit model. We just need to tell people more and they will change their behavior. It didn't work. Many people tried art. And some of that presumably sometimes worked, but it was very they would call instrumental. So how do we do an art to make people change their behavior? And things like logging, songs about logging, or an art about smoggy Beijing or something. And there was a problem with that in terms of the integrity of the art and the artistic process. So he looked at, again, I mentioned he was an artist himself. He was a musician, classical musician. And he'd also done a lot already of public engagement around art. He'd set up a music festival in Eastern Canada, and I'll talk a little bit more of something else he's done. So what he did is he formed the theoretical and methodological frameworks that met these two needs, that address sustainability but also maintain the integrity of the aesthetic process. Then he went to engage with the public through an initiative called the Greenest Cities Conversations, and he commissioned 4 works of art. It was music, theater, sculpture, and poetry. And those were all performed. And he worked with the artist. before and after those works. He surveyed the audiences, and then he sort of took it all back and integrated it together. And I would say that he found new understandings of the qualities of art which had more potential. Some of those commissioned arts works worked, some did not. What made the difference? So he created more nuanced frameworks, new questions, and new productive ways of working with artists. Along the way, in addition to his intellectual development, I would say I put in brackets the business of art and public engagement because he already knew that. But if he didn't already know that, then he would have gained a tremendous amount of experience in that. He learned how to articulate this alternative concept, and it's not easy, but he learned how to do this to non-academic contexts. So for example, not only to the artists, but to practitioners. So he's worked with sustainability, but now he's working with health practitioners in Newfoundland. He set up this government-funded retreat center for complex issues through the medium of art, addressing it through the medium of art. And funders are very excited about that. So his public engagement in his PhD helped set him up for that work that he's doing now. And he's also formed connections. So some of the artists the connections that he formed during his PhD are continuing to be involved. And the works that he commissioned are also being continued to be mounted and published and so on.
Okay. So the components of what we're calling the Public Scholars Initiative. There's 3 components, what we're calling the network, academic support, and then the funding program. Did anybody come here to talk about funding at all? Anybody interested in that? So first of all, the Public Scholars Network. So the idea is that people selected to participate in the initiative will form a network, and there will be network events. These will be research events or scholarship events where people are sharing their work, possibly getting feedback or critiques on their work, finding collaborators, networking with others who they might want to work with. We would be endeavoring to bring in people from outside of the university who are interested in topics that were put forward in advance to enhance networking and enhance feedback to students on their work. We're also expecting there to be some professional development events specific to participants in the initiative. So topics like, what is doing public scholarship, learning from others who are engaged in this kind of work. There's a whole initiative on campus around community-based research, and we've been liaising with them and talking with them about their methods and their approach. Bringing in speakers from different sectors, mentoring roundtables, maybe even getting to the point where, a student, once they produce a proposal, there could be some assistance in linking them with appropriate community partners. But that might be down the road. So this is kind of, and eventually if this kind of takes off and develops, we may be able to have online community or website around this to help people connect and showcase their research. Okay, so we touched a little bit on this. So academic support for new forms of scholarship. So we recognize, this kind of goes back to the film question, other ways of doing dissertations. We recognize that we're looking at breaking the mold a little bit here. And so in order to support this kind of work, it will call for increased flexibility in certain ways. So some students doing this sort of work, they might not be best served by 3 faculty members as their supervisory committee. They might need partners or professionals from other places to supervise them and be a recognized part of their committee. And grad studies is the unit responsible for approving supervisory committee members, so we would intend to be flexible in approving those committee members when appropriate. There's also this question, as Susan was talking about, of how do we measure and assess rigor in applied scholarship. And we're going to be learning about this ourselves. We're drawing upon research on applied scholarship, and what we intend to do is with students who are part of the initiative to work proactively with them on standards of rigor, on their methodologies, on how best to integrate this sort of work in their thesis. And we don't want these sort of new theses just sort of showing up at the last minute and then there are problems because important questions haven't been answered. So that sort of support. And then we know too that at UBC, every doctoral dissertation is evaluated by an external examiner, somebody outside of the university. And we need to make sure those examiners understand what's trying to be accomplished in this sort of work, that there might be some slightly different criteria that should be applied when looking at these sort of theses. So communicating with external examiners to help ensure that they understand the sorts of scholarship that's being presented in this work. Okay, now we'll talk about money. Okay, so the third component of the program is a funding program. So this is pretty much all taken from the email that was sent out. We hope it was fairly clear. We feel that we would be able to award up to $10,000 per student to support innovative dissertation scholarship, which the student would be otherwise unable to pursue. So that kind of gives you a hint at one of these selection criteria. So if you already have funding to do this sort of work, or if it was a piece of work that would already be expected to be part of your dissertation, then it may not rank as highly on the funding criteria. This funding can be used just for a student stipend if your funding source doesn't cover the work that you would be doing. Say you need to take an extra 6 months or what have you to do an additional component or an applied component. So if your current funding source would not allow that project, this funding could support you. A research allowance, so that could really range in how it's used. Different types of scholarship require different expenses. Do you want to say anything about the research allowance and what it would be used for? Professional development, so taking courses, or like one student I talked to about her project, and the crux of her project was to be able to create a website in which the people involved could interact. She doesn't know how to make websites, so she was wondering if some of this money could be used so that she would build up skills in that area, and I think the answer is yes. Or a travel allowance for collaborative work. We have funding for up to 50 students for this year, and students might be eligible for renewal for a second year. Yeah. And the eligibility criteria is there. Must be a PhD student in years 1 through 5. This was all in the email about how to apply, the information that we're expecting from you to apply. I think something that maybe wasn't made as clear as possible in the email is in the research proposal, ensuring that you're linking that to the goals of the initiative, making sure you're talking about how your scholarship, how this project would has a linkage to serving the public good. Okay, so making that as evident as possible. We definitely need, every application needs to have a letter of support and engagement from your supervisor. It's not going to work unless your supervisor is on board. And when we say engagement, we hope that the supervisor will be not only saying, yeah, he can do whatever he wants, but this is how I am going to work with this student to help them be successful in fulfilling this project. And then if you're requesting funding, the amount requested, how you intend to use it, and a budget. We know that budgets flux a little bit, but your best idea at what you would use the funds for and how and when, and any other information about your current funding. And if you do have current funding, why you can't use that funding to do this component of the project. It may not have been totally clear, and it actually took us a while to figure out what we mean by participating in the initiative. So let me just take a moment to talk about that. So anybody who wants to kind of formally participate in the initiative needs to submit an application, even if you don't need money. Okay, so we will be selecting participants for the initiative to include in the network. Okay, so it's as a pilot. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know how it's going to work. We didn't really want to have just a come one, come all. Everybody's included. We felt that we needed to have a framework around it and select participants who really fit the criteria and the goals of the initiative. So, our general criteria is that you have a well-developed research proposal. So those of you who are just sort of beginning to think about this, and maybe you're not very far in your program, but you know you're keen on this, maybe next year would be a better year for you to apply. We assume there will be at least a year or two. Good fit with aims of initiative and strong supervisory support. We will give some consideration to ensuring there's some diversity of disciplines, because we really want this to take root as much as it can across the various disciplines. We don't want it, to be 80% sciences or 80% humanities. We're going to be looking to try and make it as diverse as possible. And then in terms of what being a participant means, I hope this is helpful. So we've talked about a couple of aspects of the initiative. So the academic support, so the idea around helping you understand standards of rigor, having flexibility in supervisory committees, all of that sort of thing. The participants, we are going to kind of proactively work with you and kind of track your progress and be in touch with you and have a close communication with the participants. But anybody who is interested in this work, we of course are going to provide you with support and consultation and advice as needed if you're working towards kind of a unique sort of dissertation project. The PSI network research events, we envision those to be public events. So anybody can come, but the people who receive funding will be required to present at least one of the events. You'll have to present your research. People who were selected as participants but didn't need funding or didn't get funding may present. You have eligibility to present at an event like this. And others who aren't selected as a participant, of course, may attend and engage, but there won't be space for everybody to present. And then the professional development and events that are geared towards participants. Again, those who are selected as participants will be invited, can attend these events. Others who are just interested may attend if capacity allows. Does that make sense? I put other down there because I wanted to make sure to remember to talk to you or ask you about what else you want. We kind of had that conversation a little earlier. Like I said, we want to make this information and support as widely available as possible. We don't want to exclude, but just to keep the initiative manageable, there'll be some things that are open and accessible just to the participants. Well, I guess we'll end it there. Thank you so much for your interest.
Thank you.
May 15th is the deadline.